just botched that intro, but we are live. Zach should have been here, buddy. No, it's all right. We are actually down in the crew today on the podcast. We kept uh, having special guests, and then the special guest had plans, so it's just two of us in the booth, and it is none other than the Jamie Lile. Jamie, how are you this morning?
I am doing well. Thank you.
And I am in hopes that everything is working. So I'm going to have to ask you a subject real quick so that way I can make sure that we're on air. But the subject is Mother's Day. Tell people what they can be excited for tomorrow at the beginning of service about Mother's Day. Just not secrets, just what they can be excited about. The typical home church Mother's Day, Father's Day excitement.
Woohoo. So we love Mother's Day and Father's Day around here. Um, and so because of that, we have a little something special for all the mothers tomorrow. So you're definitely going to want to be here. And I can give away the spoiler alert because I feel like it might entice more people. But we have some beautiful fresh flowers here. And so all the kids can build their mom a bouquet, or the mothers can pick out the flowers for themselves. And I am all about that life because fresh flowers just make everything better.
Yes, and on the background, for those of you that normally stay tuned into the podcast, you'll notice that we don't have the picture with the normal home church logo on the stage. Like I said, we were short today, but for those of you that don't know who Jamie is which one in there in the picture for Tantera Farms?
Oh, the big tall girl. Except I'm kind of short. But I'm the mom to the two little cute kids and the wife to that really handsome man.
Yes, the very, very handsome man. So,
Like,
but
is this what it's like every time?
no. So, with Zach not being here, and typically we've been having two people lately, it's going to be probably a fairly smooth running podcast. I do tend to hop around on subjects and stuff like that, but um, with Zach not being here to kind of keep me in line, we'll see what happens. But normally he kind of gives me that look of like, let them talk about themselves a little bit. But so typically what we do is, we start off have you been with Christ? You know Christ your whole life, or was it a situation further down the road that sort of kicked that off? But for people that don't know, because sometimes the guests that we do know about, I tend to skim past those questions because I've already gotten there. So I'm gonna try to do a good job of slowing it down. Um, but you guys are great friends. You guys have taken Brooklyn and myself in, and it's like brothers and sisters. Every time we see you guys, and then we see the kids. So we get to see each other quite often because you guys are obviously here at the church 90% of the time.
Like it sometimes.
Yes, and so, but you're here on youth nights. You guys are, if you're not serving in the church in the back, or the kids in the back, you're off doing something else, organizing something else. So you're kind of bouncing around everywhere. So we usually say, what is it that you do here at home church? But you basically do everything at home church, and there will be times in the podcast where you'll hear us shout out something about Jamie, we need your help or something like that. And it's because she's generally here in the mornings, because her and Clayton are here for the morning prayer, and she hangs around and does church stuff, more church stuff, on the Saturday mornings. So if you had to put just a roundabout
Mm-hmm.
estimate on the amount of days that you walk through those church doors, what would you say is your average in a week?
Um, Probably 4 to 5 out of 7. And sometimes it's not. Like, I have to drop something off or I forgot something, so I need to
Yeah.
grab it. But, and if I'm not here working on things, like, there's sometimes where I'll just stay at the house and work on stuff so the kiddos can play, because that's kind of I tell Clayton all the time, I'm like, I cannot wait when God brings us to a new space, and hopefully that new space has like an outdoor fenced-in playground for the kids to play on, because that's always the thing. I'm like, I'm so sorry, kids, but we're gonna go up there, and I'll try to make it quick. On the days that it's not the normal, like they know Tuesdays and Wednesdays we're gonna be there for the long haul, but for the extra days, it's like try to keep it kind of short for their sake.
Yeah. And so you worship band or worship practice. You've got um, have to show up early for the Sunday mornings for the kids and kiddos and stuff like that. Get everything up and going. Um, to say that you serve, I would say the ministry that you're more in right now, but it's kind of shifting back
Mhm.
out of that is back there with the kiddos.
Mhm.
So how did worship become something that you started? What opened the door to that? Is that something that
Um.
you've always enjoyed music or?
So I have always loved worship. Like it has always been one of those things that just has been medicine for my soul in times where you just need that tangible presence of God. And I feel like through worship music, um, it comes a little easy that way. And so it's always been something that I've loved. I don't love singing in front of people. Like I don't like that part, but I know that I love worship. And there is something that's really special about being able to um, kind of help lead that in a sense for people that are maybe a little bit more inhibited or kind of insecure in how they worship. And obviously worship can look different for different people, but um, I'm, I'm not afraid to be expressive. And
Yeah.
so I love being able to at least just for the Lord be able to just give him everything that I have, and then hopefully also in that same sense be an example for others.
So for you, and this is a question that I asked Dana, because it is interesting to me. To you, whenever you're up on stage, is it easy for you to block out the crowd? Because I
Mhm.
know there's got to be that. Okay, so yes, I've got to know the lyrics to this. I've got
Mhm.
to know this part. I've also got to keep in mind where I'm at on stage. I can't lose focus of that. And then you've got to, keep the crowd in it.
Mhm.
Are you worried about, or is that something for you that's pretty easy to block out and you can
Um,
get into the zone?
I probably should do a better job of like considering all of those things. And there are times where it's like, making sure that it's like, oh, am I singing the right harmony right now? Because I never want to be a distraction. But I'm pretty quick to just close my eyes and just go be with the Lord.
And see, that's interesting because Dana was talking about how for her that's something that is a struggle,
Mhm.
and you would think by seeing how outgoing she is,
Mhm.
you would think that would just be something that was natural for her. And she's like, no, it's something that I struggle with.
Mhm.
And then you've got you who, yeah, I'm not really one for, um, you know, it doesn't really bother me what they're thinking. I don't like to be in front of the people and I don't
Oh.
like talking to the people, but whenever I can get on stage, whenever it comes to worship, I can
Mhm.
block it out. So that's interesting to
Mhm.
me. And another thing that's interesting is that it seems like the worship is bigger and bigger and bigger. Whenever it comes to a worship, the worship from when home church first started here to where
Mhm.
it's at now, being a part of that, what's something that can you feel that on stage, or is it just you're so in the moment you don't really you haven't been paying attention to it, it's always been the same to you?
No, I mean there is definitely something that's really powerful about. I mean, because even taking it from the Blue Room
Hmm.
Church, you'll hear people talk about that, but the space that we were in when we first started, and it just being Daniel Doyle on a guitar, with a room full of people, and the pureness in that. Where I mean, obviously, it was like you couldn't put on a show if you even tried because it
Yeah.
was just like unplugged and just raw worship to now where it is now when you hear it's just so beautiful to see more people get to use their gifts and talents for the Lord, and to see that, I mean, corporate worship, whether it's, one guy playing on a guitar, or like the full band and everyone, when my favorite part is when I can hear the congregation singing.
Yeah.
Like, there is something that is just so humbling and also inspiring, in the sense of like, man, this is it, because this is the church. Like, I love to worship God personally, and I love those moments. But there is something so powerful when you have a room full of people that are singing to the Lord, and have hearts that are just like open before Him, and knowing that the Spirit's moving and working, and ministering to people's hearts in ways that no man's words could. Like, it's only through the Holy Spirit, and God's presence, and what He does in people's hearts. And so that it's cool to see that, whether it is the small tiny room, or this with the full band, or whatever it is, that like God's unchanging in all
Yeah.
of that. And I don't know if I even have a preference. I just love it when people are going for it, and not having um, any hindrances in
Yeah.
that way. It's a really cool thing to get to be a part of.
And I mean, it's not. And again, I'm not trying to pull out the violin and play it for Jamie, but it's not like you get to spend a whole lot of time on Sundays. In that, obviously, Wednesday night worship, you're pretty
Mm-hmm.
much usually on stage on the Wednesday night worship. But whenever it comes to Sundays, I mean, it's not like you're fully every week, because I mean, you do a lot back there.
Yeah.
So whenever it comes to the kids portion of it, and that's always seemed like it's been plentiful ever since I've been here. I guess for
Mm-hmm.
me, when I say plentiful, the kids connecting and getting together. They're not
Mm-hmm.
just going in the door and out the door. The kids are wanting to mingle and talk with each other as well.
Mm-hmm.
So for you, I know that it started out with a few kids, but it's growing as well.
Mm-hmm.
What's it like seeing that? I mean, from going
Oh
from,
man.
like you said, the blue room, to how many kids, toddlers and stuff like that did you have then to now?
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, it's funny because I was looking at some pictures the other day that had come up on my phone from, because from the very first time that we got together, and it was just like, we're just going to get together and pray and worship and just see what God, wants. But even that day, I was like, there's going to be kids there, because it's us. I at least know our kids are going to be there, and our friends' kids. And so it was important to me, even in that place, to make sure that there was no gap for them, like that they always had a way to um, connect to the Lord and be poured into in that sense. And so from like week one of figuring out like what we were gonna do, it's like, okay, we're gonna have something for the kids, and we'll figure out how to do this. And then it's been cool to see it grow. Starting out, it literally was like a one room schoolhouse. Like, we were all together, and which is really, it worked because they, and I think that's why they have such like, I love that even the kids here have community. Like, it's not just the adults. It's like there are friendships that I know are gonna be lasting, because it's also a friendship that is based in the Lord. I mean, even for kids church, when you worship together, when you pray together, because we do, like, they know what's going on in each other's lives. Do we pray for a lot of dead dogs? Yes, we do. We really do. Like, prayer request time gets so interesting in kids church. If you ever need a laugh, I'm sure Brooklyn has shared with you. So it's like, oh yeah, yeah, we can pray for that for sure. It's like, my grandma's dog died 2 years ago. There's always those moments. Um, anyways, rabbit trail. But it really is beautiful to see for them when they start to get it, and knowing that, like, even if we don't see it in the evidence that we would maybe judge things by, to know that, like, those seeds of truth are being sown inside of each one of those kiddos, even from like infancy to fifth grade, that each week when they're here, they're getting prayed over. They're being poured into in that way. And so for me, it's knowing, and God's really been so faithful to kind of reveal this even in the past little bit for me is, because we can define what being in church looks like or going to church looks like. And, a lot of times people would think that it's just showing up on a Sunday morning, getting to sit or, stand through worship and sit through the message and then going home. But it's knowing that, like, it's worship even when I'm back there with kids because it's being that living sacrifice. It's saying my time is not my own, my comfort is not the priority, but I'm here to serve. And so, because sometimes I felt bad asking people to serve because it was like, well, I don't want to take away from their church experience. Like, I want them to be able to get poured into and that type of thing. But then it was like, God really just revealed, like, listen, I can pour in whether they're sitting in that seat or they're pouring out for these kiddos. Because as you pour out, God is so faithful to pour back in. And so it really just creates another opportunity for God to minister to people, even as you're serving and leading those kiddos. Because I'll tell you, I mean, there's been times even with the lessons that we do back there where I'm like, yeah, this is this is so good, where it's like I get fed just as much as anything else, and to know again that it's not a burden to serve. It's not an inconvenience. It's getting to be like Jesus. It's getting to say, like, I'm here for the least of these. I'm here for the kiddos, and to, especially in a world that has so much brokenness and so much that gets exposed to even young kiddos, to have a place where they can come and find truth and find the actual hope of life. Um, it's a gift and it's an honor, and it's probably why it's been a hard thing to say, like, to pass things off in a way. But change is coming. I feel it, and I know it, and it's like, okay, God, I'm gonna hold this with open hands because it's yours anyways, type thing.
Well, and the thing about serving too is it changes your church experience. So if you
Mm-hmm.
want the church experience and you just want to come to church every Sunday and check it off the list, then you can do that here.
Right.
That you're more than welcome to. But the thing about serving is it puts you in that path where God has set you. And
Mm-hmm.
so serving is something, and we talk about it with each of our guests. Well, what is it? What piece of advice would you give somebody? Because there's going to be moments where you're going to be like, man, I don't want to go to this practice. I
Mm-hmm.
want to stay home with my family. You're walking out the door, whatever the case may be. You're just zooming by Clayton as he's coming to work because he's got
Mm-hmm.
to get ready for this. So there are those moments where you are going to not want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the beauty of it. You have the choice. And when you choose to stick with it, God shows you the fruits of
Yeah.
sticking with it. And so it's one of those things where you're not going to see that stuff the next morning.
Right.
You think the next morning because okay, so, well, I'll give it a week. And then the week's gone by, and then it's like, okay, well, I'm done with this then. Well, then you didn't want it that bad,
Right. Right.
So the thing about serving is you do have to want it because there
Mm-hmm.
is going to be things that are going to tell you this is not fun. They're taking advantage of you. They're trying to do this, this, and this, and this. And the reality of it is no, you are volunteering your time to God.
Mm-hmm.
And so if he's using that in ministry, if he's using that on um, the worship team, if he's
Mm-hmm.
using it with the kids in the back. So it's just beautiful to see whenever you hear people's stories, their life doesn't start changing until I talked to Larry, and Larry got me excited about the music board, and
Mm-hmm.
and mine was JB. JB got me excited about this. I love JB to death, and I will
Mm-hmm.
never ever ever forget how he did like what Clayton is doing now with the youth for me. He brought me in. He wasn't ashamed to say, I trust you with this
Mm-hmm.
because God has put you here. So
Mm-hmm.
let God do whatever. And
Yep.
JB was there. And the thing about that is, we talked about this earlier, that trust, or you made the comment earlier,
Mm-hmm.
that trust of giving it
Yeah.
to step, it's not ours to give away. You
Right.
know, we got to, but at the same time, you can't just give it to anybody.
Right.
So that is another thing that comes around that people don't understand is it's not just Jamie and Clayton. And I've said
Mhm.
this before, whether I've been on the pulpit or whether it's been on the podcast, there are more than just Jamie and Clayton
Yeah.
making decisions. So we have to have grace on that, folks. There's not just it doesn't just come down to you guys. So there's a lot of stress that's put there. And then on top of that, you have the serving. On top of that, you have kids. On top of that, um, you own a business. On
Mhm.
top of that, you homeschool. So you're a teacher. You're also a provider of knowledge for your kids, for all of this stuff. And you still have time to smile and thank the Lord and be excited about the Lord. Give some of the folks some advice whenever it's not fun.
Mhm.
Whenever the kids are having bad days, whenever Clayton's not feeling good and then the devil's working on him and Jamie's trying to do all of this stuff and she's trying to get all this paperwork together and somebody comes to her and it's, well, I don't like how bright the lights are in the sanctuary and I don't care if I step on toes here because the thing is you have to have grace, folks.
Mhm.
Just as all of this stuff is accepted and people try to help, you have to understand that there is a body at work here. So all of that stuff is coming at you at once.
Mhm.
And the devil's working on you as well. It's not like just because you're the preacher's wife and you don't have to work outside of the home, it's not like it's easy street for you. You're teaching, you're working here at the church. Give some of the people some advice for whenever those
Mhm.
times of marriage
Yeah.
come at you, those times of trying to get the children gathered up and them to understand. And then you
Mhm.
have this body of believers here at the church and your church family. Some advice to just
Mhm.
keep the head up, keep the head up, and keep going.
Yeah. I mean, I think a big part of it with all of it, it's probably a two-sided, but yet there's so many other things to it as well. I think the first thing is um, having a heart and a mind that's set on eternity. So when the moment, the current moment feels overwhelming and it's just like, this is too much, I have this going on and this going on, and my kids are, I don't want my kids to ever feel like resentment towards us serving the Lord, and so trying to cultivate that heart and then that understands like what it looks like to really live your life on mission for the Lord and trying to do all of those things and yeah, all the stressors. It's reminding myself in light of eternity what actually matters and saying like my comfort and me getting what I want doesn't necessarily produce the fruit that has an eternal impact, but me dying to myself and saying it's not about what I want right now. Like, yes, I would love to just have an evening at home tonight, because there are those days. Um, but to remind myself, like, this is my spiritual act of worship. This is me living for eternity instead of just being stuck in the now and the things that can weigh you down now. And that might feel kind of like, I don't know, kind of far fetched and just like, well, that sounds nice, but it really it is a mind battle, and it's taking every thought captive and saying like, okay, I'm not gonna wallow right now. I'm not gonna like just moan about how I'm gonna do everything without grumbling and complaining. It's literally just washing yourself in the Word with all the things that God has said of how to live and saying, I'm choosing the better thing. It might not feel good right now, but this is truly the better thing. The impact of that has eternal impact instead of just me getting what satisfies me right now in the moment and satisfies my flesh. And so that's part one. And part two, in those moments of, because I'll be honest, like I was in a place of just kind of feeling like I was burnt out and on the brink of burnout, when it's like there's so many hats and so many things, and having that realization of like I was trying to do it in my own strength, and you can't do that. Like there's no way that we can live the life that God has called us to live in our own strength. We can't. And so it was like, full disclosure, yes, me as the pastor's wife, I was not spending daily time in the Word, and I wasn't feeding my soul in that sense. And knowing that, like, when you get to that place when your life is so full and so busy that you don't even have time to spend with the Lord, like, that's a dangerous place to be in. And so, being able to realize that, like, I cannot do this on my own strength. I can't even do it based off of the strength of yesterday, of what God did yesterday. It's knowing that I need that fresh manna for today to do what God has set before me today, and asking Him to help me see every opportunity that comes up and to try to view it as an opportunity instead of like this wasn't part of my plan for the day, to view those things the way that He views them, and to let them be used by Him instead of it just being, because I'm a plan person. I'm like this is the to-do list, this is what we're doing today, and when things come up, which it's what happens, things always
Yep.
come up, it's hard. And so being able to say, like, wait, I need to make sure I'm looking at this the way that God wants me to see it, so I don't miss out on an opportunity. Um, but yeah, the biggest thing is you will not last if you are not staying plugged into the Lord and having that daily devoted time with Him. And even that has required sacrifice. I'm not a morning person. My sweet, sweet husband is. It's a gift.
Yes.
It is a
No,
gift
it's not a
that
gift. It is not a gift.
it's a special, it's a special quality that he has. And without it, quite honestly, you the sermon wouldn't exist.
Yeah.
Like, if he didn't have that self-discipline, um, to wake up every morning at 4:30 or 5 and just get that time with the Lord. And he's so good about, I mean, I just love that man. But when it's, yes, that time is for like figuring out what God wants him to say, and studying and doing all of those things. But um, he's never so quick to get into that time that he sacrifices like his own, like, going to the Lord as God's child, not
Yep.
just as a pastor, but as God's child. And because of that, I mean, you see the fruit of it and who he is, and his, just who he is as a person. It's very inspiring. And because of him being that way, and then me realizing, like, wait a second, I've been doing all of this in my own strength, like, as the ebbs and flows come, uh, I've been trying, and I have been getting up earlier, because part of it too is, and I told him, I was like, I don't know, I just feel like I might be intruding on your time, like, I don't want to do that. And he's like, no, like, you're not intruding on anything.
Yeah.
And so that has been such a, like, refreshing spiritual discipline to get into, because it really is, that's what it is, it's a spiritual discipline. It's not like, I mean, and there's nothing necessarily special about the mornings, but I will say, for me, if I don't do it then as much as I would say, like, well, I can fit it in at different times. Like, there is something so focusing about starting your day in the Word and in prayer and just spending time in the Lord's presence that kind of shifts your mindset for the whole day. And again, when you wear a lot of hats, it's a pretty good place to
Yeah.
operate from, instead of just trying to operate from your own strength, and realizing, as, like, silly as it may sound, that, like, God can do more to strengthen me and refresh me for the day with an hour of my time that I've sacrificed of sleep than what that hour of sleep could do for me. And again, it might not look like that for everyone. It might be that when the house goes to bed and it's just the evening, that you have that time that you're reflecting and just allowing the Holy Spirit to speak to your heart, and spending time in the Word and turning on some worship music. Like, I get it. It's not going to be the mornings for everyone, but I will say, I was like, I need to do this. And it's been such a beautiful habit / discipline to get into, and has helped tremendously in refining my heart.
So we'll go back to a little bit of the life story. So whenever you were a kid, you were pretty
Mm-hmm.
much brought up in
Yep.
church.
From the time of being in my mother's womb. Yeah, I mean, it really, I knew this question was coming. And I was like, how do you define when I like came to know the Lord? Because it was, it's just been one of those beautiful things where, and I use the word beautiful a lot, but it's because like, there's so much, it is, it's just absolutely beautiful when you see God's hand and his design and just how he orchestrates things. It's impressive. Um, but I grew up in church, and I I've always loved going to church. I've loved. There was times like in the teenage years, where it was like that almost became if I was. I've always been a rule follower too, but let's say I was like in a dark season, and it was like my mom would almost use that as the bargaining chip or the threatening, like, listen, if you don't do this, then like you're not gonna be able to go to youth on
Yeah.
Wednesday night or whatever. It's like that's not normally how people like have to discipline their kids, but that it was a motivator for me for sure, because I've always loved being at church, and as far as like the building and just serving and being there. And so I mean, I remember like, I don't know, I probably was like 4 or 5 years old, and just that moment where it's like you're laying in bed and you've heard all of this truth already as a 5-year old, and it's like it sinks in, and you realize like I'm a sinner, like, and again, a lot of times I think people, it's you see both sides where it's like people will sometimes discredit like childhood salvation, and there usually is always that like, yes, and then it became really real here at this time, and I think that's just like that process of sanctification where it's like, yeah, still a sinner and needed a savior,
Yeah.
that type of thing. Um, but I remember just like laying in bed and being like, I need Jesus, and so being able to say the sinner's prayer or whatever, and talking with my mom about it, and then just being there, serving where I could. My mom helped in the kids ministry, and so as soon as I was old enough, it was like, can I serve with you? And so I would, anytime it was my mom's Sunday to serve, I would go and help her. And yeah, I mean, it's always been a joy for me in that way. And there's been really interesting parts of knowing the Lord. I mean, when you're in church, you're surrounded by people, and people sin and people make mistakes, and so it's to have to see that sometimes come out in ways where it's just like, I didn't know people were capable of that, but turns out they are, and it's like those times are hard, but it's knowing that even in those seasons um, where people have failed, where leadership has done crazy things, to look back and see how God has been so faithful to keep me in all of that, to um, because what could have been a time where my heart could have hardened and turned away from the Lord, and sadly, you know, fellow friends of mine in youth group did. And I see that now still, where it's like, man, they don't serve the Lord, they don't love the Lord, like they attributed man's sin nature to God when it wasn't him. It was just people being people and making mistakes. Like, um, it's hard when you see those things, and because it's like a weird thing. I don't really talk about it that much, but I had so I didn't date till I was 16 because that was the rule in my house, and again, rule follower. And so the first boyfriend that I had was, of course, from youth group, because that's where you find all the best males.
How many chairs could he pick up at one time?
Exactly. And he was like a skater dude.
Oh.
But it was
So he was only carrying one chair. He
yeah.
wasn't very strong. I was a skater dude, so we weren't.
Yeah, he was. It didn't turn out good, but it was one of those things where it was like the youth pastor that we had at the time there, it was a wife and her husband, but the wife was like who kind of led most of it, and they had ended up um, having a inappropriate relationship, and so that was one of those things where it was like when you have to wrestle with like, wait, this is somebody who loves the Lord and has been leading and teaching, but yet was doing all of this stuff with him. It was like a very interesting thing to have to walk through. But God was so gracious, and it's wild too because I remember like she called me whenever everything had like come to light, and she was pretty like frantic, but she had said, like I made some horrible decisions, and I'm so so sorry. But please know that everything I taught you is still true. Like I just made a horrible mistake. Um, and I didn't even know like what had happened at that point. I was like, okay, yeah, is everything okay? And then
Yeah.
like everything kind of came to light of like what had been happening behind the scenes or whatever. But I'm so grateful that even in that God was like, he was caring for my heart. He was
Yeah.
keeping me that, again, what sadly the devil did use in a lot of people's lives to turn them away from the Lord. That God kept me in that and protected me and really, my mom still, she called it like the the dark ages because it was a lot to have to
Yeah.
wrestle through as a teenager. Like when your youth pastor sleeps with your boyfriend, that's a weird thing
Yeah.
to have to like um, work through. But it also like it's interesting now being in ministry as pastors and looking at how things were carried out. God is so gracious in his sovereignty to, even now there's been times where it's like he's brought healing to hurt that happened over half my lifetime ago, and just having a grace for the people that were leading then and saying like, because nobody knows how to handle that stuff. Like
Yeah.
I don't even think people that go to seminary get trained for like, how do you handle when
Yeah.
this happens type thing. And then even knowing that, like, so after that happened and stuff, it was one of those things where it was like um we still, it wasn't like we were leaving or doing anything. God was very clear that it was like, this is still where I have you, and um, to not go until there is like, until he says go type thing. And so it was one of those things where it was kind of a weird thing to heal in the place where you were hurt. Um, but God did a lot of that, he brought a lot of healing. And then my senior year, we started going to Hope Church. And this is where God is just like, it's crazy. So we started going there, and it was my senior year. We started in January of '06, and I was like determined to not get involved because it was just like I had kind of, um, been in this place of like, I don't know, like I've always followed the rules, I've always done the right thing. Like maybe I just need to see what's out there type thing, see what's on the other side. And so I had kind of told myself, like, I'm not going to get involved. I'm about to graduate anyways, so I don't really want to hang out with the youth. And so I would just go to main service some. But somehow I found out about, they were going on a mission trip to Honduras, and they were only taking, like, seniors. And the youth pastor that was there at the time was really good about always seeking me out. Like, even though I didn't go to youth, I was that, I was that student that was like, I'm too good for this. But I really was not. But he was so good about seeking me out. And so he had told me about the mission trip and was like, I really think that you should go on it type thing. And so I started to go to youth because of that, and got to go on the mission trip to Honduras. And that, like, God just, he just broke me, and softened my heart in ways that I didn't even know it had hardened because of everything that I had walked through previously. And then, so I started to go ahead and get involved with youth, but it was kind of that weird stage of like, I had just graduated by this point because it was summer and people hadn't really known me as a student. And so, they let me start serving as far as like leading, but I was kind of like they took their students to a conference in Colorado, and I went as sort of a leader, like a chaperone, but yet I had just graduated high school, so I really don't know why I got trusted to be a leader. I'm like, I really am like some of these kids, I'm like a year older than some of them. But it was so cool. So we went out to Colorado for this conference, and I was like a chaperone and had girls. We literally camped in tents, and it was beautiful.
So it's not like the nice flourish.
No, it's
so
not the Flourish
the
Retreat
Flourish Retreat.
home at all. Nope, there's nothing. It was tents. The nice thing though is Colorado, there's no humidity.
So ladies,
yeah.
get your tents ordered.
We're going
now.
We're going.
It's officially been said on the podcast.
I mean, I wouldn't be upset about it. I don't mind tent camping as long as it's not super super hot. But yeah, so we took students out to that, and it was to this youth conference at a big church out there. It was called New Life Church, and I'd never heard of it before in my life. Or like the Desperation Band was like the band from that church. Also had never heard of them before, but apparently they were like a thing. So went to this conference, and mind you, I had I think it was like a full ride scholarship to Truman State University. I already had my class schedule because this was like a couple weeks before college was supposed to start. And again, I was still kind of in this like dichotomous place of like, I know the Lord, I love the Lord, but like I kind of want to maybe like join a sorority and just kind of see like what that life is like. So kind of wrestling this internal battle that probably not a lot of people knew about, except maybe my mom, because she's like the most discerning person on the face of the planet. She knows me better than I know myself sometimes, which is, happy Mother's Day. I love my mom. She's amazing. But so we went out to this conference, and they started talking about this internship that they had for students that have graduated high school all the way up until you could even do the internship like until the age of 30. I think it was like 18 to 30, like kind of young adult type age frame. So they started talking about this internship that you could do there, and what you would do is you would come and you would live there for the year, and the internship was to plan next year's conference. And so, again, 2 weeks before I was supposed to start at Truman, had my books, had my class schedule, had my roommate, had all of this stuff. And I was sitting there, in one of the sessions as they were talking about it, and I just had that gut feeling, where things just you just feel warm, and you just start to feel this my heart is racing. Why is my heart racing? And my mom was there too as a leader. And I remember talking to her after that session, and I was like, Mom, I don't know why, but I think I'm supposed to do that internship. And it cost money too. It wasn't like a free thing. I don't remember how much it cost, but it was like thousands of dollars, because it paid for your room and board and your food for the year, all that kind of stuff. You would get a stipend, all the books that you needed for the classes that you would take, and all that kind of stuff. And I was talking with her, and I was like, I don't know why, but I think I'm supposed to do this. And it was the Lord, because she was like, I'll call your dad and I'll talk to your dad, and we'll see, we'll pray about it and we'll see. And my dad said yes, and it was just like this crazy whirlwind. So instead of 2 weeks later moving to Kirksville, Missouri, I think it was 3.5 weeks later, I moved to Colorado Springs instead and started this internship. And again, when you can look back and see God's faithfulness, and you can see how he orchestrates things beyond what we could ever ask or think or imagine. So I went there as little 18-year-old me, and for whatever reason, my role, because each intern had, and there was 12 of us, and each intern had something about the conference that they were responsible for. One person was in charge of speakers and bands and the registration process and all that kind of stuff. And I was in charge of the accounting, which made no sense to me. I'm like, guys, I've never even taken an accounting class in high school. I don't know what I'm doing. but had a chance to kind of be trained, learn their process, see how they did things. And then I was in charge of the books for the internship that we did, um, this other part-time internship that they had, and then for the conference itself. And uh, little did I know that the Lord was preparing and training me for things that I've had to utilize here now as home church, and it's just, there are those moments where it's like you just see God's faithfulness and his hand in things. And it's like, man, God, you were working then for what's happening now. And I could have never even imagined or dreamed that what's happening now would ever be happening. And so that was pretty epic. And then I met Clayton that year. I was home on a break and went to go visit my friend Holly, and she was doing master's commission, and it was the same master's commission, which is like a 9-month discipleship program for those that don't know. Um,
Is that the same one that Dana?
Yep, yeah,
Okay.
yep. She was at a different church. I forget what one she was at, but there was a master's commission at the church that I grew up in, and that's where Clayton was at. And so I met him, and it was. Did he talk about this at all when he was on? I don't know if you guys got to any of this type of thing.
Um,
I don't remember.
I can't. I think we talked about it a little bit, but I think the majority of what we talked about was the youth portion of.
Yes.
But I think he skimmed over it a little bit.
Right.
But
well, you have the female here, so it was fun. So I met him, and it wasn't like, it feels mean to say, it wasn't super impactful for me, but it turns out it was pretty impactful for him. And so our friend Holly was kind of like the go-between for us, and I was, so when I moved back, I started working at Hope Church, and I was actually I just started volunteering because they wanted me to do a second year of the internship, but it's weird. Springfield's like this black hole that just like pulls people back in, even though when I lived in the Springs, it's like you leave Walmart and you get to see Pikes Peak. I don't know how I ever left that, other than the fact that the Lord made it very clear, because there wasn't a lot of female leadership at the youth group at the time, and so I just had on my heart, to, like, these girls need a female leader. And so I moved back and just started serving every week, and I was going to college at OTC at the time, and that whole thing, and ended up getting offered a job there to be the administrative assistant for student ministries, and so that's what I did for a while, until Clayton and I got married. But it was a journey and a process from when I met him on break when I was home from that internship to then. It was probably like 3 years, I think, of just kind of being friends and saying, no.
Yeah.
And like I had dated someone, he dated people, and it was just never. We both say we both just had a lot of growing up to do. But there was the moment where Miss Spriggs, Barbara and Leroy, who go here to home church, she was my math teacher in high school, and she was getting honored as like teacher of the year or something. And so I was working at Hope, but I went, as soon as I was finished with my responsibilities, I went to Cornerstone to see, because she was getting honored there, because Pastor Jess was honoring her for that accomplishment, because it really was a cool thing. And so I went, and I saw Clayton that day, and he makes fun of me because he's like, it's because I was playing guitar. But he was up on the stage, and they were closing out the service, and there was just a moment where I was like, I would like to believe that the Holy Spirit and the Lord led me in it, but there was just this moment where I was like, he's a man. Like, he's grown up. Like, you look like you have something to say.
It was probably because he does have very luscious hair. He was probably was he rocking the flip? The.
Well, that was when faux hawk season was in.
Oh, that was faux. Okay.
Yeah, he was. It was, and it was there. But yeah, so I went then, and that was the moment where.
What's the cologne he wears?
Oh, well, now he wears what does he wear? John Varvatos vintage or
That's
something?
what it was back in the day.
Yeah. It was probably like Aspen. Isn't like the green bottle one or something that like every dad has. But yeah, so I saw him then, and it was like something had shifted. Like there had been like a place of, in all seriousness, a place of maturity that had been reached. And I think for both of us, God had brought us through and taught us quite a bit in just those few years of knowing each other, but not being, together. And so I told my friend Holly, I was like, because I had been saying for the longest time, like, just tell him to give up. Like, it's not going to happen. Like, I'm not going to
Yeah.
date him. It's just,
He
it's,
kept up though.
he wore me down. That's what he says. But I told her, I said, tell him there's a chance. And so it was one of those things. And it's really funny. So Dan and Beth Garrett, who also go here, there was one summer that we were with a bunch of our friends, and they took us out on their boat. And Miss Beth still likes to give me a hard time about that time. She's like, I knew then, you didn't know, but I saw it. And I was like, yeah, you saw something that I didn't know either. That's true. Oh, but yeah, so it was really, God was so good in leading us and truly like helping us get to a place where we were actually like ready for each other, because I think we both knew going into it that like we weren't gonna just date to date. Like it was like, if I'm gonna date you, it's because I think there's potential here. Turns out there was lots and lots of potential. So yeah, we dated, and a few months after, I don't know, I guess it was like a couple months after we started dating is when he got offered the youth pastor position in Willow, and I nearly broke up with him then because I was like, nah, I'm not doing this distance thing. Like I did that once, it was horrible, but turns out when it's with the man that you're supposed to be with, it makes all the difference in the world. So yeah, the rest is history. We dated, and then when we got married is when I moved to Willow and joined him there. And so honestly, looking back at my life, I'm like, I don't know if there's been I don't know if there's really been a season where I haven't been serving the Lord in his church, like in his
Yeah.
body, like from probably 10 years old on, and seen very interesting parts of ministry because of that. Um, because even when I did the internship out in Colorado, I was like the month after I moved there, it was like a mega church, and some people might remember or know, but like the month after I moved there, the pastor that was there, his name was Ted Haggard, and he was exposed, and some of his deep dark sins were brought to light, and it was like national news because it was a big church and all that kind of stuff. And so again, very interesting to have like walked through moral failure in leadership, and then to go to this place that's supposed to be like an amazing church, and then walk through again like moral failure in leadership, but how good God was to even in that bring healing for what I had walked through, in seeing it handled well, and seeing um, just the way that they helped minister to the staff to help them walk through all of that. And even us as interns who had only been there a month, like it was really cool. So God has been very, very good. I mean, this is what happens when you talk to people about their life stories, yeah. Right? Like there's so many things and so many ways that it could go. But
well, and that's one of the things that I wanted to, and we're going to go back quite a ways, but talk about as a kid. Mm-hmm. So like me and you can relate as far as the strict, like, you're only watching this on TV, yep. You're only listening to this. And the thing is like, I thank God so much that mm-hmm. my parents were strict, because I am more so now. The Lord's changed my heart, but like I was a person that was never, and we talked about this, I wasn't afraid of, I wasn't wanting to do the good thing out of the kindness of my heart. It was because I was afraid of punishment.
Right. Right.
And so that's how I view God.
Mhm.
I view God as he was a punisher, and
Mhm.
you obeyed him because he was a punisher.
Yeah.
And so my walk as a child with God was afraid. And
Mhm.
so it sounds like your childhood, you had more of the knowledge of Christ and the understanding of the grace. I was
Mhm.
just always, and so it's funny to hear. That's why I like to start off the stories as a kid, because
Right.
that's one thing.
You see a lot of the foundation
Yeah,
of where
and
things have
that's
come from.
that's what I love about this church, and that's what I'm so excited for Willow to see in her
Mhm.
life, to experience that, is knowing that God's not, it's not, he's not punishing you,
Right.
like that you're going to go through some stuff, you're going to
Right.
learn some stuff, but it's just part of the
Yeah.
process. Like, you've got more than just 90 years here on
Mhm.
earth, you know. And
Right.
that was one of the things Clayton talked about it. I don't I don't remember what it was about, but he made the basic point of, if you were to look at eternity and he got up on stage and there was like a little portion of the stage
Mhm.
that was the life we live, and he was like, and eternity is way past that, you begin to realize it's like, oh, well, this is just baby steps.
Right.
Like,
It's why you can say this light and momentary affliction, because
yes.
in light of eternity, you realize how small of a little blip this suffering is, you know.
And you begin to realize that Christ wants you to be more like the kids that walk in that church than he
Mhm.
wants you to act like adults, because when you act like adults, you act like you're taking, which you do have responsibility. I shouldn't say it in that way, but he wants you to rely on him
Yeah.
and understand that it doesn't change from the time you're a child. So
Right.
that's one thing too that has really my has changed my view and understanding of Christ, is you can be a child and go to him and cry whenever you're hurt, and
Mhm.
you can go to him whenever you're in pain, and you can
Yep.
tell him your problems. And if you don't like the way this food tastes, he may not change the taste of the food,
Right.
but he's going to listen to you, and
Yep.
he's going to say, look, I understand it, boy. I get it. I get it. But you have to realize. So that's one of the things that is interesting to me, on whenever you ask somebody, who's
Mhm.
been in church for a hot minute, about their walk, and the
Mhm.
ones who really take off and begin to grow early, it seems like, are the ones that begin to understand very quickly that grace and that passion, that,
Mhm.
hey, everybody's going to mess up, and
Mhm.
you're going to trip and you're going to fall.
Mhm.
And the thing is whenever you, what we do is tend to idolize people instead of the one that created that
Right.
person,
Right.
and you start looking. And that's what I loved about home church. And I know that it's not easy for um, a church. If you want to have somebody dress fancy, you want to have this, and I walked in here, and it didn't matter that I had tattoos, it didn't
Mhm.
matter, this and that. It was the love was there. And so that's one thing that I love about this church so
Mhm.
much, and that's, you can see that in your guys' relationship. And that's, I want to talk about your guys' relationship. It was a question that I asked Dana and Tyler. Whenever you talk about getting up at 5 o'clock, that discipline,
Mhm.
we talked to Dana about discipline. Yes, there has to be an order to a church service. Yes, it is. You are trusting it in the hands of God, but
Mhm.
you also have to be orderly about it. You can't just, walk in here and think praise and worship is just going to turn
Right.
itself on.
Right.
So, whenever you talk about your relationship with Clayton on top
Mhm.
of two kids, I'll ask you what I asked, and obviously Clayton's not here to answer for the other part of it. What is it for those who are serving and
Mhm.
those who are couples? I mean, you have Zach and Caitlin. You
Right.
have all of these couples in the church that are serving in different parts,
Mhm.
and it can be, we don't get to sit in service together.
Right.
We don't get, that time together. You still make time for each
Mhm.
other, though. Their advice, they said that they were kind of a different breed. They were, their family time was here at church. They're just used to being on the road. So,
Mhm.
is that your guys' lifestyle, or are you guys more of the, you know, we find time at home,
Mhm.
type of thing?
Yeah.
How advice that you would give to keep that understanding of,
Mhm.
even though time is maybe less, you still have that little bit of time
Right.
to give.
Yeah.
And for those that find it difficult, what's some advice that you would give, and what are
Yeah.
some things that you guys do in those
Yeah.
instances?
I mean, it is. It's challenging, but I think what we've had to come to realize is sometimes you have to sacrifice good things for better things. And so for us, it's knowing that like there are endless opportunities and endless needs. And we feel because we love the people of Home Church so much, and we do, we have such a burden for our people, and to see these people know the Lord and love Him and follow Him forever and ever. Like that's the hope and that's the prayer, that they would be faithful followers of Jesus. Um, it comes with a lot of burden that can sometimes um, it doesn't go away. Like there's no, for us, I think probably the challenging part of quote unquote ministry is that it never turns off. And so for us, we've had to kind of rearrange some things and um, be really intentional with the times that we do have. So one of the things that's really important to us and that we love, but is also kind of hard to make happen, is we love just having dinner together. Like we love being home in the evenings, and that's hard because there are a lot of evening commitments that happen throughout the week. Um, and so we've had to be very intentional in guarding um, the nights that we do have. And so, and there's times obviously where things ebb and flow, where it's like, you know, this this is urgent and it is important, and so we can't just like shift it to a different time or a different day. But as generally speaking, like being very intentional to try to have, whether it's like, so for us, like Monday nights typically seem to be a night that doesn't have a lot. Um, and so being intentional of saying like, okay, we're gonna sit at the table together and we're gonna have dinner together as a family, and we love those times. I mean, I think it's partly why we have Tantera Farms too. Like that birthed out of just like our love for sharing life around the table. Like there really is
Yeah,
something so medicinal about just eating good food in good company. Like we love that. And so to enjoy that for us as a family and to create that um, value for our kids of saying like our family time is important. Like it's important that we know each other and love each other and don't just cohabitate, but that we have relationship with each other. And so sometimes it means that Clayton and I sacrifice our own uh, comfort or desire of just like, I would love to just veg out on the couch right now, but instead I'm going to play Connect 4 with Winnie, or
yeah.
I'm going to, again, you'll sense,
Beyblades.
yes, Beyblades with Cohen. Oh my goodness, yes. You'll sense a general theme of our life because it is a very important core value to us is sacrificial living. And that doesn't stop inside the walls of our home. It continues. It very much so. I mean, parenting in a nutshell is living your life as a living sacrifice
Yeah,
because it's no longer about you or your comfort. You are there now to be to steward what God has given you in that life. And so, again, we try to be as intentional as we can be to guard those times. Um, an area that I personally have been convicted in and have been trying to be better about is not being on my phone as much, because we can miss out on a lot of opportunities to cultivate really meaningful relationships just because we are distracted and we have our phone. And so even in our time at home, I've been trying to be more intentional to even just let my phone be in the other room, and I don't wear my iWatch anymore. And it's really nice to not have those constant like distractions. And then one of my other favorite things that we do is Clayton and I, most mornings, although I will say the past like couple weeks have been so crazy. And again, that's life. It ebbs and flows. So like these are just things that are like, this is the goal. Sometimes we don't get to meet the goal, but that's okay. The world is not on fire. It's not falling apart. But we love going on morning walks together. so the kids, thankfully, are. Winnie doesn't like walks. For anybody that
I
doesn't
don't blame
know,
her.
she's terrified of dogs, and so she doesn't like going on walks because of all the dogs that she might meet. But our kids are old enough now where we can they'll stay at the house and we just walk around the block and we'll check on them and then we'll do another lap around the block, and that time is just such a sweet time of just holding hands and walking and just talking about life. And obviously for us a lot of times our conversations revolve around the church and just the people and just what God is saying and speaking, and just and it's so cool when you see the evidence of like having that personal time with the Lord, and then knowing that like you're in tune with the spirit, where it's like it's so cool that like what God is speaking to me, God is speaking to Clayton, and to hear it as we walk and talk and have those conversations, and then to see how Proverbs talks about iron sharpens iron, and so it's like being able to be that for each other is a really sweet thing. um, but yeah, it's I mean our home is probably not the most typical home because again, sometimes you say no to good things so you can say yes to better things. And so we limit our screen time. We try to have meals together and do those things and play and just be there with yeah. I mean, Clayton's probably better at it than I am. I would like to use the excuse that I'm with the kids all the time, but that's probably not a good excuse. But like he's so good about when he comes home, like
Well, he's a
most
kid.
he is. He really is.
He's a
It's a
kid.
gift. It's an absolute gift. But he's so good about just like dropping everything. Like when that you are the most important thing to him whenever you're around him. And that is such a gift to know that like he's so good about being just fully present where he's at. And so in that sense he kind of teaches me because I'm maybe not the best at that sometimes because I just get distracted and busy or selfish where it's like I just want to sit here type thing.
And I've always been a huge Clayton fan because I'm somebody that I do enjoy talking and I
Mhm.
enjoy um so self-conscious and stuff like that that he makes you feel welcome no matter what or who you
Mhm.
are. And so for being somebody who went from, like I said before, you're afraid of God and then you find out the love of God, well
Mhm.
then you have really no friends around you because you've weeded that out of your life.
Right.
So I'm not complaining about um, that was a good thing for me because I was somebody who latched on to friends and whatever
Mhm.
they did, I did. So
Right.
that was things that weren't good. So to have somebody who is going through all this stuff and running a shop at the same time and you walking in and while customers are still there having a conversation with you about what's going on,
Mhm.
um, to me I'm forever grateful. And I
Mhm.
know you guys say it before that you don't like recognition, but that is truly what has that's a blessing that me and Brooklyn, you guys have given us, is realizing it's not about just you. You
Mhm.
we don't even have. I mean, obviously Willow on the way. We don't have kids right now, and you guys had all this stuff going on, and you were still making it to youth night, and it was one of those things where God allowed it to where Brooklyn could have Wednesdays off,
Mhm.
and so well, we jumped on that opportunity, and from that we've seen just the blessing in our relationship, and it's
Mhm.
just she's a part of the church now, and that was something that she'll tell
She
you
is a
she never
gift
thought.
to my life, that girl. She
And
is a gift.
yeah, it's just cool that it's practice what's preached. And
Mhm.
so to I mean the basis of it is whenever it comes down to it, everybody wants the easy.
Mhm.
What how does this work? Okay, so there's five simple steps
Right.
that Jamie and Clayton are going to give us on a Sunday sermon or on Flourish or on a base camp retreat.
Mhm.
They've got the answers. The answer is you're going to have to work. You've
Mhm.
got your part to do in it.
Yeah.
And you made the comment about how part of the ministry that you guys are in. Um, it asks a certain amount out of you. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's kind of one of those things where you could bring that back to your cross to carry. And you guys, the cross that God has asked you to carry, you guys are currently carrying it. And the congregation sees that. And that's one thing that I'll go back to as well, that, you just, it's not easy. And it's not at times going to be fun, but it's worth it.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever you let's go more back into the kids area.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about kids and the sort of the homeschooling and all of
Mm-hmm.
that aspect. You guys are very good at, I mean, your children are very polite, they're very very well mannered. So is that something that you would attribute to being able to spend more time with them, or is that, obviously it's the godly lifestyle that you guys live, but your kids are very knowledgeable. They catch on to things that, to me, normal kids their age don't catch. It's just, the understanding. Do you attribute that to the Christian, obviously the Christian lifestyle,
Mm-hmm.
but is that you being able to spend more quality time with them? Do you feel like?
I mean, I don't know how much I can take credit for with them because there's so many times where I'm like, God, how did I get so blessed? Like, I
Yeah.
mean, I truly, I love my kiddos. Are there days where I want to like pull my hair out for sure? But like when I sit back and look at just who they are, it's the Lord, and I think we are very intentional. Like, and I get like homeschooling is not for everyone. Like not everyone is called to do that, and you have to know that you're called to do it because it's not easy. And so the days where it's just like, oh my goodness, what would it be like if I could actually just send them off to school and have 7 hours to be a productive human being? But again, for me, it's realizing that like first and foremost, my role is to steward what God has given me. And He's given me these two kiddos that ultimately are His. And so, how can I disciple them? How can I show them and lead them in the paths of righteousness that God has been faithful to show me, so then they can walk in that as well. Um, and so, I mean, we, for all intents and purposes, they live a pretty sheltered life. I'm not gonna be like, it's true.
Mhm.
Like we shelter them quite a bit. There's stuff that we don't watch. There's games that they don't play, and I don't say that in judgment at all.
Yeah.
It's just it truly is. It was like a burden that God gave me as far as being able to protect their innocence as long as possible, because there's so much in this world that can steal that quicker than I would ever like it to happen. And so just doing what we can to teach them and show them. And I think um, God really put on my heart, and like when it comes to mothering and parenting in general, is just that mindset of like it's discipleship in its truest form. Like these are little tiny disciples that every day they're looking at me and they're watching how I speak and how I treat people and how I live and how I spend time in the Word, or if I haven't, and they see the fruit of that pretty abruptly, on those days where it's like I am lacking in patience and self control.
Yeah.
But even in those moments of humanness, to allow those to still be teaching times, and knowing that like I mean, discipline and disciplining our kids, like it comes from discipleship. It's teaching and training. It's correcting. It's you know that admonishing and reproof, but for the sake of leading them into a place of knowing what truth is and knowing God's design for life and His way, and knowing that His way is better than any other way that the world might try to throw in their face as something to follow. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is we get pretty much every waking moment together.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of teaching opportunities. But even for parents that aren't homeschooling, it's just the time that you do have, use it. Be intentional. And again, it requires sacrifice. It requires saying, like, okay, I'm tired. I know that I'm tired and I would love to just like check out right now. But this is who God has given me, and so I want to steward it well, and so I'm going to use these moments, um, and it's the consistency in it, as far as like always trying to,
Yeah,
even on the days.
and that wasn't a question that I was asking to make a stab at the homeschooling or to make a
Yeah, no,
stab
no,
at
no.
the ones who send regular school. My point behind that question is that Dana and Tyler, they made the comment that their parenting isn't going to be the same style as everybody
Right.
else's, but it works for them. And so I just want people to realize that are listening to this that you don't have to monitor Jamie and Clayton's lifestyle and make that your lifestyle.
Right.
It's not going to work for you guys. It's
Mm-mm.
not going to. Don't try to be like Dana and Tyler. They're saying what they're doing is working. Do what works for you, and what works for them that you need to border it off of is it's quality. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what you're saying right there is
Mm-hmm.
it's quality time that you're getting to spend with them. It's not about mirroring it off of another family's lifestyle because it's not
Right.
going to be the same. Your kids aren't going to be, and one kid may get along with the other kid and they may be interested in the same thing, but in the long run or in the grand scheme of things, it's not the same family. It's
Right.
different all around. So it's one of those things where I think people can get caught up in we got to keep up with
Right.
this look, this image, and it's like the thing is we're all called to different things. We're
Mm-hmm.
all here for different things. And it's not about what hat you wear, it's the fact that you put that hat on and you wear it knowing that God called you to wear that hat and you're going
Mm-hmm.
to do it proudly.
Yeah.
So it to see just that has really helped me too.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing that the quality that you're spending, the time that you're spending, you may not have a lot of time and you may have a lot of time.
Mm-hmm.
But he can do more with that little bit of time than he can with a lot of fake time that you
Yeah.
try to spend with him. So it's the quality time that really matters. And whenever, like the flourish, because it doesn't just stop at the kids' ministry, then you move on to the next part of it, and you are a big part in the women's ministry as
Mm-hmm.
well here at Home Church. So that's another hat that you wear. Whenever it comes to being sort of a leader in that role,
Mm-hmm.
what are some things that people maybe don't understand the level of burden that it could put on, especially like I said, whenever you're wearing all these other hats,
Mm-hmm.
and on top of that, you're being a leader for your husband, you're being a leader for your children. Then on top of that, you're viewed in a, and it's again, it's not about titles, it's not about
Right.
any of that, but just naturally with that role,
There's
here it's
expectation.
going to come. What are some things that just for you is a roadblock that you've now realized and you've overcome and you've been like, okay, well, I need to work on this as a leader in a sense
Mm-hmm.
because, like one of my things is anger, something
Mm-hmm.
like that. Those are things that continually bother me that I'm working on every day. So you have that, and I'm just for the youth leader aspect of
Mm-hmm.
it. So what's something that for you is a roadblock that you realized, hey, okay, this is something that I've got to work on? Is it, Clayton said whenever it came to the youth, it was a title. He
Mm-hmm.
wanted the title. And so he had to realize that in order to be in ministry, he had to let go of that wanting a title and realize that he's just anybody can be a minister. And then this fruit started. Have you
Mm-hmm.
reached that point yet, and or is that before home church even happened?
Yeah. So, yes and no. I think for me, there's so the struggle for me, and I think as we like diagnose childhood, a lot of it comes from that. Um, the enemy can twist anything that's good.
Mm-hmm.
And so serving and always being somebody who is doing, um, there have been seasons in my walk with the Lord and in serving the church where the doing uh, became where I found value. And so, if I, in doing things well, because I maybe love perfection, if I could be perfect, it's actually been quite the journey this past year to realize how not perfect I am, and to um, personally be so dependent in needing God's grace in uh, so many areas. And so it's been a continual learning process of realizing that, like, when it comes to all of this, my my value and my purpose isn't even in the doing. It's just, it's that Mary and Martha thing, it's like being at the feet of Jesus, and knowing um, that that is the better thing. Like, and so recently too, God has been really, like, we did the leadership class stuff, and that I'm like, I don't know, if nothing else, maybe it was just for me, because there was a very uh, big, um, I guess, revelation for myself of realizing that keeping my hands on everything and being in everything um, isn't sustainable, for one. Um, Even as the Lord being my source of strength, I don't have to do everything. And so that's one thing, but also knowing that by me doing everything, quote unquote, it limits other people being able to use their gifts for the Lord. And so it's kind of been this humbling but yet freeing process of realizing that, like, though I thought I was holding things with open hands, I had actually had my fingers wrapped around them pretty
Yeah.
tightly. And so allowing God to open my hands, for one, um, and for me to let go of that doing in perfectionism, and saying, like, it's okay if things don't get done exactly the way that I would do them. Craig Rochelle has a phrase, and it's called Gitmo, and it's get good enough to move on. And the first time that Clayton had shared that with me, I was like wildly offended. I was like, that is not a thing. There is, like, no, that is not like good enough to move on. It's, you don't move on until
Yeah.
it's perfect. Like, and that's kind of how, like, my mindset has been. And so God has been so gracious to refine that out of me, and realizing that there really are things where it's like, it's good enough to move on. It's okay.
Yeah.
Like, I don't need to spend 4 more hours doing it this way, or doing it myself, when someone else can do it. And that also allows them to use their gifts and their talents. And so um, even with the Flourish stuff, I'm so grateful that it's not all just on me. We have Kim and
Yep.
Caitlin and Mandy that have, like, been helping, and we had a team last year too that helped direct all of that. And so for me, it's personally learning how to let go of things, and allowing people to use their gifts and talents for the Lord. Because how sad would that be if at the end of all of this, my hands gripping onto things kept God from being able to do what He
Yeah.
wanted to do? And I'm getting tearful because it really is this, like, it's freeing and convicting all at the same
Yeah.
time, because it's like, man, there's so much life and growth that can happen when we finally let go of things and let God do what He wants to do. Um, and two, there's wisdom in saying there are times where things have to be held because there's no one else to hold them.
Yeah.
But as God is growing Home Church, and as He is growing the people within this church, I can see His faithfulness to provide what's needed for even my own heart to be able to say, like, I can confidently hand this off. And what a relief, and what a beautiful thing to get to see it flourish in someone else's hands. But it requires letting go and not being so hung up on doing it my way
Yeah,
because my way is not the best way, no matter what sometimes my brain likes to tell me.
yeah. Well, and that's the thing too, and I'll go back to uh, you and Clayton opening up the opportunity to let me start doing the youth. I mean, if you guys had held on to that, um, would we be here right now?
Right.
And the another thing too is, and he's not here right now, so I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna plug you, Zach.
He deserves to be
He deserves to be
plugged.
plugged because you can tell with his confidence in
Hmm.
speaking. Whenever we were doing and I want to thank Mandy for letting us have the opportunity to do the announcement
Yeah.
videos, because I could see it, just her sacrificing that time and letting Zach be on TV in front of people. He spoke so much better. He's
Hmm.
so much more confident.
Hmm.
And to see that blossom in him, to see him go from wanting to just kind of, I'll sit here and I'll do the work, but I don't want to be seen or anything
Right.
like that. And it can be scary and frightening whenever you do have to talk and you do have to
Hmm.
do those things. So it bothered him, but um, Mandy letting go of the announcement videos, and they may be awful. And
No, it was great. I think everybody enjoyed him.
the thing is though, like, she offered that up. That for
Hmm.
her, Mandy does a very good job of coordination, and
Hmm.
so I want to give her a shout out for that. Um,
She's on
but
it.
her and Corinne, they do a very good job of the announcement videos. The behind the scenes on those things for me and Zach, it was awful because you've got so many things running through your head. They do them lickety split, and I just want to tell her that I appreciate that because I could see it blossom in him.
Yeah.
And to my my experience was Clayton
Hmm.
allowing me to do those things, allowed me to, and the Lord blessed me to, and He was like, "Hey, look at Zach here. Look what's going on," and you could see that, and so
Hmm.
that's just such that is a praise report to what you're saying.
Hmm.
Letting go of
Right.
things sometimes is better than
Yep.
trying to do them yourself because you're then giving yourself glory and saying,
Hmm.
okay, well, this isn't going to happen unless I can do it.
Right.
Um, and so you're saying letting go is something that has, and is this something that has been always, have you always dealt with this, or is that just something that has kind of just been since you've
Oh,
taken on the responsibilities that you've taken on?
yeah. No, I mean, I think again, it's that aspect of being a doer has always been a struggle. A doer and a perfectionist, like those have always been the nemesis of
Yeah,
me. Um, and so, I mean, it really has probably just been within this year um, that God has really kind of revealed that truth to me as far as needing to let go and knowing too that it's like and that comes oops sorry from being okay with making mistakes
yeah,
and being okay with failure. And again, that competes with my desire for perfection. But again, as I've been walking and I've had to and I've seen how not perfect I am and experienced God's grace, then it gives that freedom to say like we might I might hand something off and it might not go great.
yeah,
Who knows? But that's okay. Like I trust that God is above everything. And so if I trust that he sits on the throne, he's sovereign, he's in control, then that means I can trust that he can use even the failures and the mistakes and he can use them and turn them around for our good and his glory. And so that brings peace to me in the old tendencies that still have a hard time dying of wanting to hold on
yeah,
to things. I have to remind myself like no, like and and it's okay. We are I mean, I know that in a way we're an established church and we have people that have been doing life together for longer periods of time, but in the same sense, we're 2.5 years old,
yeah,
and so it's like we are going to make mistakes. There's going to be times where we disappoint people or we let people down, or we didn't do things the way that people thought we were going to do it, or this didn't go the way that we thought it was going to go, or this person said something kind of crazy, and I now we have to like deal with that, and that's okay because that's just life. And so it's taking all of that mess to the foot of the cross and saying like, okay, God, this is what's happened. What what would you have us do? How do we go from here? How do we walk this out from here? And being okay with those mess up moments, because again, that's a chance for God to shine through. It's like Paul says, I'll boast all the more in my weaknesses, because that's when God's strength really gets to come to life inside of us, because we realize that it's not by our power, it's not by our will, but it's by God's, and and being okay with that and trusting Him in that.
Yeah, and this is going to sound extremely silly, but we talk about it's okay to make failure, or
Mm-hmm.
to make mistakes, because sometimes you either A, get complacent, or B, you don't know.
Right.
And so if you're complacent, you need to be taught to not be complacent.
Right.
And if you don't know, you need to be taught. And so I used to have a very bad anger. I was awful. And so I left my sunroof open on my car, and it poured. And so Brooklyn's used to me going off of the rails, and I was fine with it.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, well, why? And I remember sitting there thinking to myself when it happened, why?
Mm-hmm.
And I realized, like, this has nothing to do with, like, God. And then God was like, now you know,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to pay attention, because you need to make sure your sunroof's closed now.
Mm-hmm.
So now you know. He was like, that's why you go through some of these things in
Right.
life. He was like, A, you get complacent, or
Mm-hmm.
B, you need to be taught. And
Mm-hmm.
so you can bend or you can break. And
Right.
if you bend and you get taught and you start to learn instead of trying to stiffen up and break, then
Mm-hmm.
you can start to realize that these give and these take things, it works in your favor. Being flexible works in your favor,
Right.
and being fluid and being understanding. And that's one of the things that is interesting whenever you talk about that, giving it up and understanding that sometimes mistakes are going to happen, because sometimes mistakes need to happen,
Mm-hmm.
because A, you need to be taught, or B, you get complacent. And so that's one of the things too, when it comes to understanding. People are going to make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
People are going to come in on a Sunday, they're going to be tired, they're going to be here because they understand that they need this place in some way, shape, or form.
Mm-hmm.
They need this place in their life, so they're going to come in even though they're tired, even though they're cranky, they may not be in the best mood. You're going to catch somebody on an off day. You're going to catch somebody on an off week.
Mm-hmm.
People have lives outside of here. It's not just, okay, so they come to church, they're Christian. We had somebody, um, and it rubbed me the wrong way, and I understand why he said it, but in the same time, there was a guy that came in the shop the other day, and he goes, you guys Christians? And I said, yes, sir. And he goes, so you're going to do right by me, right? And he goes, give me a good deal, aren't you, because you're Christians? And it's like, look, like,
We still have bills to pay.
well, there's that aspect of it, but it's like, you're wanting to take advantage
Right.
of us because we're doing the right thing, and it just kind of, so there, you're going to have those moments where it all, people are going to think one way,
Mm-hmm.
something's going to be another way, you're in a different
Right.
sort of mindset than another. So that was just my point behind that, is like you have to have understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And as somebody who wears a lot of hats, who's in a bunch of different departments, who is mingling with a bunch of different people, you're dealing with the newer people, you still have friends that are here, you've Barbara,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she was your teacher, so you've known her
Mm-hmm.
for forever. Your mom, your dad are here, just to see that you can still have a smile, and it's not a fake smile. You guys are truly happy. That comes from what? What do you accredit that to? Just because everybody wants, I want people to understand that you don't need to have the Lyle household rules and
Right.
regulations. You don't have to um, cook your dinner the way they
Right.
cook their dinner.
But if you
But
do want some Chanterra Farms
there
ingredients,
you
they
go.
help.
Yep, there's the plug. Um, what it all boils down to is, whenever in the end of the day, whenever you've had a bad day, Clayton's had a good day,
Mm-hmm.
kids having this day, that day, you're understanding and you understand, hey, things aren't going to be perfect. Is that something that you think is attributed to you guys have been put in this lifestyle, and it's, you know I don't know what I'm trying to get here. Do you just, it seems like a lot is handed on your plate at a younger age, and
Mhm.
I know that there is more than just Jamie and Clayton. There is the board,
Right.
there is all of that stuff, but at the same time, that's a lot at a young age. For you have a company. I mean, it's like
Mhm.
I don't think people realize that Clayton is he is the main employee there.
Right.
It's not like it's a fully staffed.
Right.
He
He's not
can't
just a manager.
he can't know. And so
Yeah.
whenever Clayton says he's going to work, he's going to work. On top of
Mhm.
that, Clayton is a preacher. On
Mhm.
top of that, he is a very good father. On top of that, he
Mhm.
is a very good husband. People, like I said, they want the secret to success. It's obviously working hard. But these people that see they're in a down spot and you guys
Mhm.
still smile, you guys still thoroughly love and you thoroughly enjoy, even though all of these other hats are being worn, all of this other
Mhm.
stuff's going on. What is it that you would urge them to
Mhm.
do immediately? Just immediately. Because I think a lot of people want this secret right now,
Mhm.
but they have to realize something. And what would that advice that you would give them be? They have to
Yeah.
realize something.
You have to realize that it there's so many things that it requires daily devotion to the Lord. I mean, it doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't who we are right now, as you've heard even just in our story, it's because God has been working and growing us, and it it's one of those, like, it's a follow me as I follow Christ thing, because I promise I don't have the answers, but I know who does. And so in the moments where we're gonna fail, and we have failed, or we make mistakes, it's knowing that, like, it's follow me as I follow Christ. And I'm going to do my very best to read his word, follow his word, spend time in his presence, spend time in prayer, do all of those things. And I'm still going to fall short. But that's the gospel. That's We need Jesus. If we can't do it all. And so in those moments, have grace for yourself, and have grace for the people that you're doing life with when they let you down and they make those mistakes. And then you keep on going. You keep on following the Lord. You keep on pursuing him even when it hurts, even when they're suffering. It's knowing that those things, they develop and they cultivate inside of us the maturity, the character, the wisdom that we need for life and godliness. And it's knowing that his word has every answer for every question that we have. It might not be like book, chapter, verse, like, what should I do with this? But it's knowing that as you follow his word and his ways, then he carries you through those times. So I don't know if that really answers the question, but
Well,
I mean,
I
that's what it is.
I was trying. I was having a tough time asking the question because the basis that I was trying to guide you in, but at the same time I didn't know how to ask it, in a way. But it was realizing that it's not you.
Right.
That you guys have given it to. It's sacrifice. It's the
Mhm.
sacrifice, and that's what's called.
Mhm.
That's what's called out of you is the
Mhm.
sacrifice. So understanding that the Lyle family, they're not doing this stuff because they're praying the right prayer, because they're doing exactly the right things. Whenever it comes to how they live their life, they're praying 30-minute prayers twice a day. Clayton's doing that. It's not that. It's
Right.
that
There's
what
no
they are.
formula.
There's no formula. There,
Yeah.
well, there is. It's
Yes.
sacrifice, and that's the thing. People are looking for that, and
Right.
it's the sacrifice. You're going to have to give up,
Mhm.
and a lot of times they look at that and they think, okay, so that means I need to give up more of my time at home and spend more of it at church. And there's a fine line that you can cross there,
Mhm.
because there's sometimes God is calling you to spend time in your home.
Yeah.
And that was something recently that became lighted to my eyes. Was like I was in that mindset of I need to spend more time with God because Willow's coming, so I need to hurry and jam pack this time.
Mm-hmm.
And God kind of like put the brakes on, and He was like, "You're not even really spending time with your wife."
Mm-hmm.
And these are kind of times right now when she needs you. So right now, it's really been good to say, "Hey, I'd like to go on the Saturday night, but we haven't
Right.
spent time
Yep.
together." And so sometimes there is going we I mean, I know that we boot and talk about the sacrifice and the serving. I know we kick that hard and we talk about that a lot, but people also have to realize that sometimes you're going to have to not.
Mm-hmm. Well, you have to make sure you're making the sacrifice for the right thing.
Yeah.
You don't want to sacrifice your marriage on the altar of friendship
Yeah.
because in God's eyes what is the more important thing is your marriage because you've made that covenant to each other and to him. And so again, sometimes we have to say no to good things so we can say yes to the better thing. And knowing that, yeah, I mean sometimes it's saying sometimes you have to disappoint people, like,
Yeah.
so you can protect and guard and pour into what is the most important thing, because honestly, as much as we we love and labor over home church, at the end of the day, if we're not good, if our marriage isn't good, then this home church can't be good.
Yeah.
And so it's knowing that on the realm of priorities, our family actually does come before the church,
Yeah.
and that's a hard thing to wrestle with. And there's some pastors out there that would say differently, but it's knowing that, like, in Clayton, I know his heart is this, like, if he can't lead our home, if he can't shepherd our home, what good, you can gain the whole world but forfeit your
Yeah.
soul, like, you can, maybe he can shepherd a church and grow a church and it be just absolutely thriving and amazing. But if it comes at the cost of our marriage or our family and the health of that and shepherding that first, then, I mean, from what I have found in scripture, then that's not okay.
Yeah.
And so it's keeping those priorities right. And it's hard because it comes at a disappointment to someone else. And it's hard to disappoint people.
But that's that bending process,
Uh-huh.
instead of trying to stiffen up and try to please both people,
Right.
because you have to realize that, hey, this is a learning point.
Mm-hmm.
So if I disappoint them and they can't understand that, and that was kind of something a couple of weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
Brooklyn had a one of those sleeping classes, and Leonard, I'm gonna call you out because he skimped out and stayed home and watched. I can't remember if he watched the draft. I think it was the draft, but him and Michael, I'm calling both of you out. But um, it was a Thursday night, and Brooklyn was going to go to this class. Well, Dalton has that discipleship,
Mm-hmm.
and Brooklyn was going to go to this class by herself. And I was thinking to myself, like, I would feel bad for that woman that went to that class
Right.
by herself. And I was like, I understand there's the discipleship, but your wife, you probably should be with your wife. And it was the first time in a long time that I felt that stiffening, and
Mm-hmm.
I was like, no, you just got to give up. You're going to disappoint. I hope I didn't disappoint Dalton too bad, but I hope he understands. But, you know, there's going to be a cost. Sometimes you can't please everybody, and that's
Right.
part of that understanding
Mm-hmm.
process. And I know we kind of went off track a little bit there, but my point was you just have to realize that not everybody's story is the same, and
Right.
you can't try to image your life just because somebody is in a certain position,
Right.
and that there are multiple wheels behind this train that's rolling. And granted, everybody rolling a wheel is rolling that in the direction of the Lord,
Right.
but it's not just one person. So, and that was kind of the reason that I made the comment about the flourish is
Mhm.
you have started to let these things go,
Mhm.
so that way other people can bloom. And
Yeah.
I think that, like, the Easter, you see things like this and stuff like that. You begin to open up doors, and you open up. Um, I think we started with just the kids. Well, then we had the choir and the kids,
Mhm.
and so you see these processes and opening of the doors, and it's so cool to see. I have been here not as long as the Blue Room, but we talked to Dana and Tyler about seeing churches grow, because they said,
Mhm.
they talked about they've been at the beginning of many churches. So I don't know if you were more of a pretty much one church
Mhm.
through the majority of your life,
Yeah.
but just with home church, from seeing what the first was to now to what it's got the potential to be,
Mhm.
what is the thing in your that God has shown you from the start to the finish that has really just sort of been vibing with you as of late, from
Mhm.
just the starting process of, hey, we're going to do this in the basement of my mom and dad's house,
Right.
to this isn't going to work, so we got to go somewhere else,
Yep.
to, and
Mhm.
I mean, we talked a little bit about the kids side of it. You see
Yeah.
in the kids side that you were like, oh, we've got way too many kids for this. We're going to have to get just for the
Mhm.
kids, to now what we've got going on back there, to the crowds that are now Sunday. It's 100
Mhm.
and some. Whenever
Mhm.
I started, it was 50. Whenever you guys started, so what's been something that you've really here lately? God
Mhm.
has just shown you the fruits of that labor, and you just looked on it and been like, "This, you've just blessed us so much personally, not as like a church,
Mhm.
just you personally." What have you seen from there till right here, and just looking on it, just really been
Oh
like,
man.
man,
Yeah. No, I mean, I think I don't even know where to begin with it. It's just I don't know if I can put into words just how absolutely humbling it is to get to to serve the Lord and lead his people. And because even though I don't I wouldn't even say that that's it's not even why but because sometimes I'm like, am I don't even know if I'm leading his people, but I know we love these people,
yeah.
and it's knowing that God has entrusted us with who he has here, and the opportunity to grow in the Lord together and to shepherd the flock is just it is a continual humbling thing of just like, who are we? Like there's times where we'll sit on our back porch and it's like, who would have thought? Like
Yeah.
never in my wildest dreams did I ever see this. And it's humbling to get to walk it out, even though it's hard. It's so hard. I mean, there's times where, you have those moments of like, why do we even do this to ourselves? Like it's so hard. But then you see people grow. You
Yeah.
see where and I think that's the biggest blessing. Like that those are the moments that it's like when you see somebody get it. When you see someone who's been struggling with something and you see God work in their heart and bring freedom, when you see prayers that you've been praying and you see the answer to those prayers come to fruition, like, and I don't know, there was we were I guess it was last week. Um we were sitting there at Mandy and Leonard's and there was people over and everything, and Clayton and I just had this moment just eating our pizza and chips, and we looked around and it was just like, holy cow, God trusts us with these people? Like, wow. And because man, I I hope and I pray that everyone who walks through the doors of home church feels that and knows that they are seen and that they're loved, and that yes, we have a community that's tight knit and we love each other, but there is always
Yeah.
room for more. and to see God's faithfulness already and how He has um, grown us. And I don't even mean that numerically. I mean depth.
Yeah.
I mean like the way that He has people that haven't taken their walk with the Lord as a serious thing, seeing them hunger and thirst for more of God is just like, this is why. This is why we do it. It's for those moments of people experiencing the Lord and knowing Him in that deep personal way and hungering for more of Him. I think that's the coolest thing is when you see people that are like hungry for the
Yeah.
Lord. And yeah, it just, there are many, many, many moments and days where we just have that, like, how is this our life? Like, this is, God is so good. So, so good. Even in the days where we're crying, because it's like, how is this our life? Like, it still is like, it's still good.
Yeah.
Because God has orchestrated it all. And the, the things that we've learned, even in, you know, yes, we've both been in ministry before this, but there is something very different about um, the mantle of being the lead pastor compared to like any other position that we've been in up until this point. Um, and we don't take that lightly. We don't we don't take that. It is a burden. It's a good burden, but it is a burden for us in our hearts um, to shepherd well and to steward well and to not hinder what God wants to do in His people and to just be a vessel in that sense.
So we are we're gonna come to a close here, and I don't. Zach usually asks the question: is there anything that we didn't talk about, or that you would like known that you,
Mm.
um, or that we didn't get to talk about, or something that is on your heart that we didn't speak about that you felt led that you wanted to talk about? If not, it's not a big
I'm
deal.
like,
I
I
just
don't think so. I think we've covered a lot of it. I mean, I think the biggest thing that it's like, man, if I could just encourage our people in something, it would just be to carve out time to spend with the Lord on your own because there is something as believers that it's a gift. It can sometimes feel like an obligation, but it's not. And so, um, yeah, I mean, that's just been my prayer lately. It's just that God would give us such a hunger for His word and His presence that we're willing to make the sacrifices that it requires to know Him and to follow Him. And not just on a surface level, but to truly be people who live life on mission, ready to put away and hang up our own desires for the sake of what God wants and what He's leading and um, asking of us in the day to day moments. Not just here at church serving, but literally like you're at the grocery store and you see someone, why not go
yeah,
up to them and say, like, can I pray for you? And again, that feels weird. It feels awkward to say that, but like, why wouldn't we? We know truth. We have the answer. And as much as like the world and the postmodern world that we live in would like to say that like everything's relative and you do you and I'll do me, but it's like, no, guys, there's only one way and we know that way. So
yeah,
why would we not share it? Why would we not?
yeah.
Like, and and again, I think you can only get to that place of boldness when you have spent personal time at the feet of the Lord and just allowing Him to teach you and refine you and speak to you.
And then the final question slash segment. So Zach usually asks, "Is there anything that we can pray for with the Lyle family or for you or whatever?" But I'm gonna put an additive on that, and we're gonna do like what we've started doing in youth. If you don't have anything that you need prayer for, you have to tell a praise report.
Mm-hmm.
So one or the other. A prayer and or a praise report.
Oh goodness. I mean, you can always pray for us. I think the biggest thing, I mean, there's so many things. Wisdom,
Yeah.
just constantly, just wanting wisdom beyond our years and wisdom that only comes from the Holy Spirit. You can pray for that for us, and just that we wouldn't grow weary in doing good. And I think that again, that's my prayer for all of us, though, is that we wouldn't grow weary in the better thing, in the thing that God has for us, and making those sacrifices and doing good. Because I think the enemy would like to lie to us a lot of times and try to get us to take easy street when easy street doesn't lead us to where God
Nope.
wants us. So those would be the things.
You heard it, ladies and gentlemen. Well, we appreciate you spending your time. We have actually got a graduation party that we have to go to,
Mm-hmm.
so we are going to go ahead and get off here. But we appreciate you again spending your time, just letting people in. I know it can either be A, really easy, or B, very, very hard to open up the doors, especially whenever you're a prominent figure. But both you and Clayton and everybody on the podcast has come on here, open up their hearts, and let the people understand that, hey, we're going to have struggles. This is what we can help you out with. This is what we would do. And if it doesn't work for you, that doesn't mean that you're dumb and you don't get it. Sometimes God has to teach you a different way than
Mm-hmm.
somebody else. But so if you're going through it right now and you need prayer, don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to ask for help, anything like that, because
Mm-hmm.
the enemy wants you to feel like you're defeated and wants you to feel like you're not worthy. And because you're not doing something right, this is why you're in the situation you're in. So if you need prayer, don't be afraid to ask for it. We love you guys. We will
Mm-hmm.
be here tomorrow at 9 o'clock in the morning. I believe we are on Beatitudes. Is
So
that
he's taking a break for Mother's Day. It's going to be a really
okay?
good message, though. I'm excited for it. I'll listen to it on the live stream later because I'm in kids' church with Brooklyn. But
So excited to hear the Mother's Day. Everybody, bring your mothers. We will be handing out surprises and loving hugs at the door. So join us from 9 till whenever
the Lord is done.
yeah, whenever the Lord is done. Whenever whatever Rev's feeling. So we love you guys, and we will see you next week.